The auction block stood beneath the merciless Arizona sun as Nora Hartwell fought to remain standing, one hand cradling her swollen belly while the other gripped the wooden platform for support. 8 months pregnant, and being sold like cattle, this wasn't how her life was supposed to unfold. Sweat trickled down her temples as the auctioneer's voice rang out over the crowd gathered in Fort Bowie's dusty square on that scorching July afternoon in 1873. Next up, gentlemen, a healthy woman, 22 years of age, comes with a bonus child due within the month. Strong back, good teeth. Bidding starts at $50. Nora kept her eyes fixed on the distant mountains, refusing to meet the hungry gazes of the men before her. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her fear, though her heart thundered in her chest. Her baby kicked inside her, as if sensing her distress. Behind the crowd, half hidden in the shadow of the mercantile, Vaughn Xavier shifted uncomfortably atop his Palomino stallion. At 31, he'd spent the last decade building his ranch, the Double X, into one of the most prosperous spreads in the Arizona Territory. He'd come to town for supplies, not to witness this abomination. $60, called a gruff voice from the crowd. 75, countered another. Vaughn's jaw tightened as he observed the woman on the platform. Her honey-brown hair was pulled back in a simple braid, her dress threadbare but clean. Despite her condition and circumstances, she stood tall, dignity intact. Something in her quiet defiance stirred him. $100. Shouted a portly man Vaughn recognized as Hiram Tucker, owner of the mining operation north of town. Tucker was known for working his laborers to death, men and women alike. The auctioneer grinned. $100. Do I hear 125? Before he realized what he was doing, Vaughn urged his horse forward, parting the crowd like Moses at the Red Sea. $5,000, he called out, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent square. A collective gasp rose from the onlookers. The auctioneer's mouth hung open. "Mr. Xavier, did I hear you correct? 5,000. You heard me," Vaughn replied, his eyes meeting Nora's for the first time. In them he saw not gratitude but suspicion, and rightly so. Men didn't pay fortunes for pregnant women out of charity. "Well then," the auctioneer stammered, clearly stunned. 5,000 once, 5,000 twice. Sold to Mr. Xavier of the Double X Ranch. As Vaughn dismounted and approached the platform, he could hear the whispers rippling through the crowd. He just bid his entire year's profit from the cattle drive, perhaps more. What kind of fool would do such a thing? Nora stood frozen as the tall stranger approached. His face was sun-weathered beneath his wide-brimmed hat, his eyes the color of a summer sky. He wore no gun belt like many of the men in town, but his presence commanded respect nonetheless. "Come along, Mrs." he said quietly. "Miss," she corrected, her voice barely audible. "Nora Hartwell." Vaughn nodded, offering his hand to help her down from the platform. "Miss Hartwell." "I'm Vaughn Xavier. Let's get you somewhere more comfortable." Her legs trembled as she descended the steps, the relief of being away from the auction block warring with fear of what this man might expect from her. When her knees buckled, Vaughn caught her elbow, steadying her without a word. "Why?" she whispered once they were clear of the crowd. "Why would you pay such a sum?" Vaughn adjusted his hat, uncomfortable with the directness of her question. "No one deserves to be sold like that, especially not in your condition." She studied him, searching for the lie, the hidden motive. "And what do you expect in return, Mr. Xavier?" "Nothing you're thinking," he answered firmly. "You'll have a place to stay until your child is born. After that, you're free to go wherever you please with whatever funds you need to start anew." Nora's eyes widened in disbelief. "You can't mean that." "I do," he said simply, leading her toward the general store. But first, let's get you some proper supplies. You'll need things for yourself and the baby." As they entered the store, the proprietor's wife, Martha Simmons, hurried over, clucking with concern. "That was quite a spectacle, Mr. Xavier," she said, eyeing Nora with curiosity rather than judgment. "Does the young lady need a place to rest? Actually, Mrs. Simmons, we need to purchase some essentials. Miss Hartwell will be staying at my ranch until her child arrives." Martha nodded, understanding more than was said. "Come with me, dear. We'll get you fixed up proper." She led Nora toward the back of the store, where women's items were kept. Left alone by the counter, Vaughn found himself confronted by Sheriff Thomas Blackburn, a fair man who'd kept the peace in Fort Bowie for 15 years. "That was a mighty generous thing you did out there, Vaughn," the sheriff said, leaning against the counter. "Might I ask why?" Vaughn shrugged. "Seemed the right thing to do." $5,000 worth of right, the sheriff raised an eyebrow. "There's talk already, not all of it kind." "Let them talk," Vaughn replied, unconcerned. "Miss Hartwell needed help, I provided it. And the father of her child." "I haven't asked," Vaughn said firmly. "Her past is her business." The sheriff nodded slowly. "Just be careful. A single man bringing home a woman in her condition. People will assume things." "People often do," Vaughn replied dryly. "Doesn't make them right." An hour later, with the wagon loaded with supplies and Nora settled on the seat beside him, Vaughn guided his team out of Fort Bowie. She sat stiffly beside him, one hand still protectively cradling her belly, the other clutching the edge of the seat. "It's about an hour's ride," Vaughn said, breaking the uncomfortable silence. "The ranch house has several spare rooms. You can take your pick." Nora nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Mr. Xavier, I don't know how to thank you. No thanks needed," he interrupted gently. "And please call me Vaughn." "Vaughn," she repeated, testing the name. I need you to understand something. Whatever your intentions, I won't, Miss Hartwell," he said, his tone respectful but firm. "I meant what I said earlier. You'll have a safe place to stay, food to eat, and care when your time comes. Nothing more will be asked of you." The tension in her shoulders eased slightly. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Vaughn was silent for a long moment, his eyes on the trail ahead. "My mother was sold at auction," he finally said, his voice low. "She was carrying me at the time. A good man bought her freedom, gave her a job as his housekeeper. He and his wife raised me as their own after she died in childbirth." He glanced at her briefly. "I'm just passing on the kindness." Nora's eyes filled with tears. She quickly blinked away. "I'm sorry about your mother. It was a long time ago," he said simply, "but I never forgot what that family did for us." As the wagon crested a hill, the Double X Ranch came into view, a sprawling two-story house with a wide porch, surrounded by outbuildings and corrals. In the distance, cattle dotted the landscape, and the mountains provided a stunning backdrop. "It's beautiful," Nora breathed. "It's home," Vaughn replied, a note of pride in his voice. "Took me 10 years to build it up from nothing." As they approached the house, a gray-haired woman emerged onto the porch, shading her eyes against the sun. When the wagon pulled up, she hurried down the steps, her expression curious. "Mrs. Abernathy," Vaughn called as he set the brake, "we have a guest who will be staying with us for a while. This is Miss Nora Hartwell." The housekeeper's eyes widened at the sight of Nora's condition, but she recovered quickly. "Welcome to Double X, Miss Hartwell. I'm Eleanor Abernathy. Mrs. Abernathy keeps this place and me from falling into complete disarray," Vaughn explained as he helped Nora down from the wagon. "She's also the best cook in the territory." "You flatter me because you want apple pie for supper," Eleanor retorted good-naturedly before turning to Nora. "Come inside, dear. You look dead on your feet." Vaughn watched as the older woman gently guided Nora into the house, already chattering about which bedroom would be most comfortable. Something tight in his chest eased at the sight. He hadn't been sure how Alina would react to his impulsive decision, but he should have known better. The housekeeper had a heart as big as the Arizona sky. As he began unloading supplies from the wagon, his foreman, Miguel Reyes, approached from the stables. "Interesting trip to town, I take it?" Miguel asked, eyeing the parcels clearly meant for a woman. "You could say that," Vaughn replied, handing him a crate of provisions. Miguel, who had worked alongside Vaughn for 8 years, simply nodded. "The men will talk. Let them. As long as they do their jobs, they can talk all they want." "And this woman? She is important to you," Vaughn paused. "She needed help. That's all there is to it." Miguel studied his boss for a moment before shrugging. "If you say so, amigo, just know that we have your back, whatever comes." Inside the house, Alina had settled Nora in the largest guest room, which featured a comfortable bed, a washstand, and a rocking chair near the window that overlooked the mountains. "Rest now," Alina was saying as she poured fresh water into the basin. "I'll bring up some tea and something to eat." "You're very kind," Nora murmured, perched on the edge of the bed. "I'm not sure what Mr. Xavier told you about me. He didn't need to tell me anything," Alina interrupted gently. "I have eyes. You're in a delicate condition and you need care." "That's all that matters." Tears welled in Nora's eyes. After months of hardship and fear, such simple kindness was overwhelming. "Thank you," she whispered. Alina patted her hand. "Rest now. Everything else can wait." When the door closed behind the housekeeper, Nora finally allowed herself to cry quiet, exhausted tears of relief. Her hand moved to her belly, feeling the gentle movements of the child within. "We're safe for now, little one," she whispered. "But don't get too comfortable. We can't stay here forever." The next morning, Nora awoke to sunlight streaming through the curtains. For a moment she was disoriented, the soft bed and clean sheets unfamiliar after months of hardship. Then reality rushed back: the auction, the mysterious rancher, his incredible generosity. She dressed in one of the simple but well-made dresses Martha Simmons had helped her select in Fort Bowie, grateful to have something clean and appropriately sized for her condition. After washing her face and braiding her hair, she made her way downstairs, following the aroma of coffee and bacon. In the kitchen, she found Alina kneading bread dough while Vaughn sat at the table, reading through some papers. "Good morning," Nora said hesitantly from the doorway. Both looked up, Alina with a warm smile, Vaughn with a nod that seemed almost shy. "There you are, dear," Alina said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Sit down before you fall down. The baby needs nourishment." Vaughn stood immediately, pulling out a chair for her. "Did you sleep well?" he asked as she eased herself into the seat. "Better than I have in months," she admitted. "Thank you again for your kindness, Mr. Xavier Vaughn," she corrected herself. He nodded, returning to his own chair as Alina placed a plate laden with eggs, bacon, and biscuits before Nora. "Eat up," the housekeeper urged. "You're much too thin for a woman in your condition." Nora didn't need to be told twice. The food was delicious, and she realized she hadn't had a proper meal in weeks. "I've been thinking," Vaughn said after a few minutes of companionable silence. "Dr. Wilson comes by the ranch every month to check on the hands and the livestock. He should be here next week. I'd like him to examine you if that's agreeable." Nora paused mid-bite, surprised by the consideration. "That would be very helpful, thank you. In the meantime," Alina added, "you should rest and regain your strength. The garden could use some attention if you're feeling up to light work, but don't overdo it." "I'd be happy to help in any way I can," Nora said quickly. "I'm not afraid of hard work." Vaughn frowned slightly. "You're here to recover, not to earn your keep." "Nevertheless," Nora replied with quiet dignity. I prefer to be useful. Something like respect flickered in his eyes. As you wish, but promise you'll rest when you need to. I promise, she agreed, touched by his concern. After breakfast, Vaughn excused himself to tend to ranch business, and Alina showed Nora around the house, a tour that ended in the nursery that had been prepared years ago for the children Vaughn's late parents had hoped would fill the home. It's been empty all this time, Alina explained, opening the door to reveal a sunny room with a handcrafted crib, a changing table, and a rocking chair. Mr. Vaughn's mother passed before she could give him siblings. His father kept it ready, hoping his son would marry and fill it with grandchildren. Nora ran her fingers over the smooth wood of the crib. It's beautiful, and Mr. Xavier's father passed 5 years ago, Alina said softly. Heart gave out during a cattle drive. Vaughn's been alone ever since, except for the hands and me. He never married. Alina's expression grew thoughtful. There was a young lady in town he courted for a time, daughter of the bank owner, but she chose a life back east over one on a ranch, no matter how prosperous. Nora nodded, understanding. It's not an easy life. No, Alina agreed, but a good one with the right partner. She gave Nora a meaningful look that the younger woman pretended not to notice. I should see about that garden, Nora said, changing the subject. If you'll point me in the right direction. The days that followed fell into a peaceful rhythm. Each morning, Nora would help Alina with breakfast, then spend an hour or two in the garden, weeding and harvesting vegetables. The physical activity felt good after the confinement she'd endured, and the fresh air brought color back to her cheeks. Vaughn would often join them for meals, but otherwise kept his distance, seemingly intent on giving her space. She would see him sometimes from the garden, working with the horses or conferring with his men, his tall figure distinctive even at a distance. At night, Nora would sit on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in hues of gold and purple. Sometimes Vaughn would join her, sitting in companionable silence or sharing stories of the day's work. He never pressed her about her past, and she was grateful for his restraint. A week after her arrival, Dr. Wilson made his monthly visit to the ranch. He was a kind-faced man in his 50s who examined Nora with professional efficiency and gentle hands. The baby is positioned correctly, he pronounced after his examination. And despite what you've been through, Miss Hartwell, both you and the child appear to be in good health. When do you expect her time will come, Doc? Vaughn asked from where he waited in the hallway. Within the month, I'd say, perhaps sooner. The doctor packed his instruments into his bag. She should avoid strenuous activity, but gentle walking is beneficial, and plenty of rest, of course. After the doctor left, Nora found herself alone with Vaughn for the first time in days. Thank you for arranging that, she said softly. It's a weight off my mind to know the baby is well. Vaughn nodded, his expression unreadable. Is there anything else you need? Anything I can do? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with unspoken meaning. Nora studied him, this man who had spent a fortune to save her without asking for anything in return, who kept a respectful distance yet ensured her every need was met. You've done more than enough, she finally replied. More than I can ever repay. I don't want repayment, he said firmly. I told you, I know what you told me, Nora interrupted gently. But I also know that a man doesn't part with $5,000 without reason. Vaughn's jaw tightened. I gave you my reason. Your mother, she acknowledged. But is that all? He looked away, his gaze fixing on the distant mountains. Does there need to be more? No, she admitted. But I can't help wondering if there is. Vaughn was silent for a long moment. I've built something here, he finally said, gesturing to the ranch around them. Land, cattle, a fine house, but at the end of the day it's just empty, when I saw you on that auction block." He hesitated, searching for words. "I saw someone who needed help, yes. But I also saw someone with more courage than anyone in that square." Nora felt her cheeks warm at the unexpected praise. "I was terrified. Yet you stood tall," he countered. "That's true courage, being afraid but standing your ground anyway." He met her eyes directly. "I admired that." Before she could respond, one of the ranch hands called for Vaughn from the corral, breaking the moment. With a nod of apology, he left to attend to whatever problem had arisen, leaving Nora to ponder his words. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Nora finally spoke of her past. "My father was a shopkeeper in Philadelphia," she began quietly. "He died last year, leaving substantial debts. My fiancé, Peter, promised to handle everything if I'd marry him immediately." Vaughn listened silently, his face impassive in the fading light. "After the wedding, I discovered the debts were largely his gambling losses he'd hidden from everyone. When I confronted him, She touched her cheek unconsciously, remembering. "He wasn't the man I thought he was." "He hurt you," Vaughn stated, his voice tight with controlled anger. Nora nodded. "When I learned I was with child, I thought he might change. Instead, he became worse. One night he lost badly at cards. To pay his debt, Her voice faltered. "He sold you," Vaughn finished for her, understanding dawning in his eyes. "To cover his gambling debts." "Yes," she whispered. "To a man taking laborers west. I was transported with others, most bound for the mines or ranches as indentured servants. When we reached Fort Bowie, they decided an auction would bring better prices." Vaughn's hands gripped the arms of his chair, knuckles white. "This man, your husband, what was his name?" Nora shook her head. "It doesn't matter now. He's 3,000 miles away and I'm—" She looked around at the peaceful ranch. "I'm here." "It matters," Vaughn insisted. "A man who would sell his wife and unborn child deserves nothing," Nora interrupted firmly. "He deserves nothing from me, not even hatred. I won't waste what energy I have left on him." She placed a protective hand on her belly. "My focus is on the future now." Vaughn studied her in the twilight, respect evident in his gaze. "You're a remarkable woman, Nora Hartwell," she smiled faintly. "I'm a survivor, Mr. Xavier. Nothing more." "Much more," he contradicted softly. "Much more indeed." The following day brought unexpected visitors to the Double X. Nora was helping Alina snap beans on the porch when she saw a cloud of dust approaching from the direction of Fort Bowie. "Riders coming," she called through the open door to where Vaughn was reviewing the books at his desk. He emerged onto the porch, shading his eyes against the midday sun. "3 of them," he noted, his expression darkening. "One looks like Sheriff Blackburn." Sure enough, as the riders drew closer, Nora recognized the sheriff. The other 2 men were strangers to her, one elderly and well-dressed, the other younger with a hard face and expensive clothes. Vaughn stepped off the porch to greet them as they dismounted. "Sheriff," he said, nodding to Blackburn before turning to the others. "Gentlemen, what brings you out to the Double X?" The sheriff looked uncomfortable. "Vaughn, this is Judge Hollister from Tucson and Mr. James Caldwell from Philadelphia." At the mention of Philadelphia, Nora felt her blood run cold. She stood slowly, one hand bracing against a porch column for support. The younger man, Caldwell, spotted her and smiled thinly. "Ah, there she is, my wayward sister-in-law, brother-in-law." Vaughn repeated, his gaze shifting between Caldwell and Nora. "Miss Hartwell didn't mention, because she's a liar and a thief," Caldwell interrupted smoothly. "She stole valuable family heirlooms before fleeing east, abandoning my brother, her lawful husband." Nora stepped forward, anger overcoming her fear. "That's not true. Peter gambled away everything we had, including his mother's jewelry. He sold me to cover his debts. Judge Hollister cleared his throat. Mr. Caldwell has papers indicating Mrs. Peter Caldwell is his brother's legal wife and that she absconded with family property. He has come to retrieve both. Retrieve? Vaughn's voice had gone dangerously quiet. She's not property to be retrieved. Perhaps not, the judge conceded, but the law is clear. A wife belongs with her husband. Her husband sold her. Vaughn's control was slipping, his hands clenched at his sides. Sold her and his unborn child. Sheriff Blackburn stepped forward, clearly trying to diffuse the tension. Vaughn, I understand how you feel, but we need to sort this out properly. If Mr. Caldwell's claims are legitimate, they're not, Nora insisted, descending the porch steps to stand beside Vaughn. James Caldwell is as dishonest as his brother. They've swindled half of Philadelphia with their schemes. James Caldwell's pleasant facade cracked slightly. Watch your tongue, Nora. Remember who you're speaking to. I know exactly who I'm speaking to, she replied coldly. What I don't know is why you've come all this way. Peter was happy enough to be rid of me. Caldwell's smile was reptilian. My brother has had a change of heart. He misses his beloved wife and eagerly awaits the birth of his child. Vaughn snorted in disbelief. More likely he's realized there's money to be made from the situation. The flash in Caldwell's eyes confirmed Vaughn's assessment. Whatever his reasons, Peter wants his wife back, and the law supports his claim. Judge Hollister nodded solemnly. I'm afraid that's correct, Mr. Xavier. Unless Mrs. Caldwell can prove mistreatment, he sold her. Vaughn exploded, taking a step toward the judge. What more proof do you need? Proof beyond her word, Caldwell interjected smoothly. She's always been imaginative. My brother explained that he arranged for her safe passage west with a respectable labor contractor. He intended to join her once he settled his affairs. Nora gasped at the audacity of the lie. That's not what happened, and you know it, the sheriff raised his hands placatingly. Look, we all need to calm down. There's a proper way to handle this. He turned to the judge. Your Honor, given the lady's condition, perhaps we could delay any decision until after her confinement. The judge considered this, nodding slowly. That seems reasonable. Mrs. Caldwell can remain here until the child is born. Then we'll reconvene to settle the matter. Unacceptable, Caldwell snapped. I have a train to catch back east. This needs to be resolved today. Your train can wait, Vaughn growled. The baby can't. Caldwell's eyes narrowed as he studied Vaughn. You've developed quite an attachment to my brother's wife, Mr. Xavier. One might wonder why. Vaughn took a menacing step forward, but Nora caught his arm. Don't, she whispered. It's what he wants. With visible effort, Vaughn restrained himself. Miss Hartwell, Mrs. Caldwell is under my protection until her child is born. After that, we'll address these claims properly with evidence from Philadelphia if necessary. The judge nodded. That seems fair. 1 month, Mr. Caldwell. Surely you can remain in the territory that long. Caldwell's jaw worked as he calculated his options. Fine, he finally spat. 1 month. But she remains Mrs. Peter Caldwell, and that child is my brother's heir. Remember that, Xavier. With that parting shot, he remounted his horse and spurred it savagely, heading back toward Fort Bowie without waiting for the others. The judge sighed heavily. I apologize for the disruption, Mr. Xavier, Mrs. Caldwell. He tipped his hat to Nora. I'll return in 1 month's time to resolve this matter formally. After the judge and sheriff departed, Nora sank onto the porch steps, trembling with reaction. They found me, she whispered. I never thought they'd come this far. Vaughn sat beside her, his expression grim. Your brother-in-law is lying. About all of it. Of course he is, Nora agreed bitterly. The Caldwell brothers have been lying and cheating their way through life since childhood. But they have money and connections. People believe them. I believe you, Vaughn said simply. Nora looked at him, tears welling in her eyes. Thank you, but it may not matter what you believe. The law can be fought, he interrupted firmly. I have some influence in the territory. And I'm not without resources. You've already spent a fortune on me, she protested. I can't ask for more. You're not asking, I'm offering. He hesitated, then added quietly, I won't let them take you back, Nora. Not to that. The conviction in his voice sent an unexpected warmth through her. Why do you care so much? Vaughn was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. When I was building this place, he finally said, I had a vision of what it could be. Not just a successful ranch, but a home, with laughter and family and life. He glanced at her briefly. Seeing you standing tall on that auction block, it reminded me of that vision. Nora's heart quickened at his words. Mr. Xavier Vaughn, I'm carrying another man's child. I know that, he replied steadily. And I know you've been hurt and betrayed by men who should have protected you. I'm not asking for anything, Nora. I'm just telling you why I care. Before she could respond, pain knifed through her abdomen, sharp and insistent. She gasped, doubling over. Nora. Alarm filled Vaughn's voice as he reached for her. What's wrong? The baby, she managed through gritted teeth. I think it's coming. In an instant, Vaughn was on his feet, scooping her into his arms as if she weighed nothing. Eleanor, he shouted as he carried Nora into the house. Send Miguel for the doctor. The baby's coming. The next hours passed in a haze of pain for Nora. Eleanor, who had assisted at many births over the years, took charge, sending Vaughn to boil water and gather clean linens while she helped Nora into bed. It's too early, Nora gasped as another contraction gripped her. The doctor said I had weeks yet. Babies come when they're ready, Eleanor replied calmly, wiping Nora's brow with a cool cloth. And sometimes a shock or upset can bring them sooner. Your little one must have heard that snake Caldwell and decided it was time to make an appearance. Despite her pain, Nora managed a weak smile at the housekeeper's characterization of James Caldwell. Will the baby be all right? Being early. We'll do our best, Eleanor promised. You're both strong, I can tell. Now, when the next pain comes, I want you to bear down. Outside the bedroom, Vaughn paced the hallway like a caged lion, stopping only when he heard Nora cry out. The urge to go to her, to help somehow, was overwhelming, but he knew his presence would only complicate matters. Miguel had ridden for the doctor immediately, but Fort Bowie was an hour away. There was no guarantee Dr. Wilson would even be there when he arrived. As the afternoon wore into evening, Nora's cries grew more frequent and desperate. Vaughn found himself praying something he hadn't done since his father's death. He prayed for Nora's safety, for the child's, and for the strength to protect them both from whatever came after. Finally, as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, a different cry pierced the air, the indignant wail of a newborn taking its first breath. Vaughn froze mid-stride, his heart pounding. After what seemed an eternity, the bedroom door opened and Eleanor emerged, her face weary but triumphant. A boy, she announced, smiling at Vaughn's evident relief. Small but strong, healthy lungs on him, that's for certain. And Nora. Exhausted as you'd expect, but she came through it well. Eleanor patted his arm. She's asking for you. Vaughn hesitated. Are you sure I should? Go on, Eleanor urged gently. Just for a moment, she needs to see a friendly face. Taking a deep breath, Vaughn entered the bedroom. The air was warm and heavy with the sense of blood and sweat, but also something indefinably new. Nora lay propped against pillows, her face pale but radiant as she cradled a small bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. Vaughn, she said softly, looking up as he approached. Come meet my son. He moved to the bedside, oddly nervous. The baby was tiny, his face still red and wrinkled from the ordeal of birth, a tuft of dark hair plastered to his head. "He's perfect," Vaughn said, his voice husky with emotion. "What will you call him?" Nora looked down at her son, her expression tender. "William," she decided, "after my father, William Thomas Hartwell." Vaughn nodded approvingly. "A good, strong name." He hesitated, then added, "Not Caldwell." Nora's expression hardened slightly. "No, Peter forfeited any right to this child when he sold us. William is a Hartwell." "As he should be," Vaughn agreed. He reached out hesitantly, one finger gently touching the baby's tiny hand. To his surprise and delight, the infant's fingers curled around his in a surprisingly strong grip. "He likes you," Nora observed, smiling at the wonder on Vaughn's face. "Smart boy," Vaughn replied, carefully extracting his finger. "You should rest now, both of you. I'll be nearby if you need anything." As he turned to leave, Nora caught his hand. "Vaughn, thank you for everything." He squeezed her fingers gently. "Get some sleep. We'll talk tomorrow." Outside the bedroom, Vaughn found Miguel waiting with Dr. Wilson, who had arrived too late for the birth but could now examine both mother and child. "Eleanor says all went well," the doctor commented as he prepared to enter the room, "but I'll make sure." "Thank you, Doc," Vaughn said gratefully. "Whatever your fee, double it," Dr. Wilson chuckled. "Let me examine my patients first." While the doctor was with Nora, Vaughn pulled Miguel aside. "I need you to ride to Tucson first thing tomorrow. Find Judge Hollister and tell him the baby has arrived early. Then I want you to speak with Thomas Reynolds at the territorial office. Tell him I need to call in that favor he owes me." Miguel nodded, understanding the urgency. "What about the brother-in-law? He's staying at the hotel in Fort Bowie." Vaughn's expression darkened. "Keep an eye on him, but don't engage. I want to know if he makes any moves." "Consider it done, patron." When the doctor emerged from the bedroom, his expression was satisfied. "Mother and son are doing well. The boy is small but healthy. Miss Hartwell or Mrs. Caldwell, I suppose, Miss Hartwell," Vaughn corrected firmly. The doctor raised an eyebrow but continued without comment. "She should rest completely for at least a week. No exertion whatsoever. The baby should nurse frequently to gain strength." "She'll have everything she needs," Vaughn assured him. After the doctor departed, Vaughn settled into a chair outside Nora's door, determined to stand guard through the night. Despite his intentions, exhaustion eventually claimed him, and he drifted into an uneasy sleep. He awoke at dawn to find Eleanor placing a cup of coffee in his hands. She slept through the night, the housekeeper informed him quietly. The baby woke twice to nurse but settled quickly. Vaughn nodded gratefully, stretching his stiff muscles. "Miguel's riding to Tucson today. I want you to stay with Nora and the baby at all times. Don't let them out of your sight." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "You're expecting trouble." "I'm preparing for it," he corrected, sipping the strong coffee. "James Caldwell strikes me as a man who doesn't give up easily." "Neither do you," Eleanor observed with a knowing smile. Before Vaughn could respond, a soft cry came from within the bedroom. He rose immediately, but Eleanor placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Let me," she said gently. "Some things a new mother prefers to handle privately." Reluctantly, Vaughn nodded, watching as Eleanor slipped into the room. The days that followed settled into a new rhythm centered around the baby's needs. Vaughn kept his distance during the day, managing the ranch and making preparations for whatever might come. But each evening, he would spend time with Nora and William, sitting beside the bed and sometimes holding the baby while Nora rested. To his surprise, he found himself increasingly captivated by the tiny boy. William's dark eyes, so like his mother's, seemed to study Vaughn with solemn curiosity, and his grip grew stronger by the day. "He's thriving," Nora remarked on the fifth evening, watching as Vaughn cradled her son with growing confidence. Thanks to you. Vaughn shook his head. Thanks to his mother's strength. Nora smiled, though her eyes remained worried. Have you heard from Tucson? About the judge? Miguel returned yesterday, Vaughn confirmed. Judge Hollister will be here in 2 days to hear the case. And James, still in Fort Bowie. Spending most of his time at the saloon, from what I hear. Vaughn's expression darkened. He sent a telegram east. We don't know what it said. Nora bit her lip anxiously. He's planning something. I know him too well to think he'll simply accept defeat. Vaughn carefully placed the sleeping William in the cradle beside the bed. Let him plan. I've made some preparations of my own. What kind of preparations? He hesitated, not wanting to burden her with details. Legal ones, mainly, and I've sent for someone who might help your case. Nora raised an eyebrow questioningly, but Vaughn merely smiled. Rest now. Trust me to handle this. The following day brought an unexpected visitor to the Double X. Vaughn was in the corral, working with a spirited young stallion, when a wagon approached from the direction of Fort Bowie. As it drew closer, he recognized Martha Simmons, the storekeeper's wife, driving the team. Mrs. Simmons, he greeted her, handing the horse off to one of his hands. This is a surprise. Martha climbed down from the wagon with surprising agility for a woman of her years. Mr. Xavier. I heard the baby came early. Thought I'd bring some things that might be useful. She gestured to several packages in the back of the wagon. That's very kind of you, Vaughn said, helping her unload. Miss Hartwell will appreciate the thought. Martha gave him a shrewd look. It's not just gifts that brought me, Mr. Xavier. I have information you should hear. Vaughn led her to the shade of the porch. What kind of information? About that James Caldwell, Martha replied, lowering her voice though no one was nearby. He's been drinking heavily at the saloon, boasting about taking his brother's wife and child back east. Says he's going to sell the baby to a childless couple in Philadelphia for a tidy sum. Vaughn's blood ran cold. He said this openly. Men talk when they drink, Martha confirmed grimly. And they talk even more when a friendly barmaid encourages them. Sally at the saloon heard it all. Does the sheriff know? Martha snorted. Sheriff Blackburn's a good man, but he needs evidence, not saloon gossip. Besides, Caldwell's careful around him. Vaughn nodded thoughtfully. Thank you for telling me, Mrs. Simmons. This could be important. There's more, Martha added, her expression troubled. Caldwell's hired 3 men, rough types. They've been asking questions about your ranch, the layout, how many hands you employ. He's planning to take her by force, Vaughn realized, his jaw tightening, before the judge arrives. That would be my guess, Martha agreed. You should be prepared. After Martha had visited with Nora and the baby and departed with promises to return soon, Vaughn called his men together. In terse language, he explained the situation and outlined his plan. Double the guard tonight, he instructed Miguel. I want men stationed at every approach to the house. No one gets through. What about Miss Hartwell and the baby? Miguel asked. I'll stay with them, Vaughn replied. If trouble comes, we'll move them to the root cellar. It's the most defensible space. The men nodded, their expressions grim. They might be ranch hands rather than gunfighters, but every man among them was loyal to Vaughn and prepared to defend the ranch against intruders. As darkness fell, Vaughn joined Nora in the nursery, where she sat in the rocking chair nursing William. Something's happening, she said immediately, reading his tense expression. Tell me. Briefly, Vaughn explained what Martha had revealed. I've doubled the guard, we'll be ready if they come. Nora's arms tightened protectively around her son. He wants to sell William. His own nephew. It won't happen, Vaughn promised. I won't let it. Despite his reassurance, Nora remained anxious. After William fell asleep, She insisted on helping Vaughn prepare the root cellar with blankets and supplies, just in case. "You should rest," he urged as they made their way back upstairs. "You're still recovering." "I can't rest knowing they might come for my son," she replied, her voice steady despite her fear. "I'd rather be prepared." Vaughn couldn't help admiring her courage. "We'll take shifts watching. I'll wake you if there's any sign of trouble." In the end, trouble came just before dawn, when the sky was beginning to lighten in the east. Vaughn, who had been dozing in a chair outside the nursery, was awakened by Miguel's urgent whisper. "Riders approaching from the south," the foreman reported. "4 men moving quietly." Vaughn was instantly alert. "Get everyone in position. No shooting unless absolutely necessary." After Miguel departed, Vaughn entered the nursery where Nora slept in the rocking chair beside William's cradle. He touched her shoulder gently. "Nora," he whispered, "we need to move to the cellar now." She awoke immediately, years of caution having trained her to light sleep. "They're here, approaching," he confirmed, already lifting William, who remained asleep. "Stay close to me." With practiced efficiency, they made their way to the kitchen and through the trapdoor that led to the root cellar. Vaughn had prepared a small lantern which cast just enough light to see. "Stay here," he instructed, placing William in her arms. "Whatever happens, don't come out until either I or a leaner comes for you." Nora caught his hand before he could leave. "Be careful," she whispered, her eyes luminous in the dim light. "Please." On impulse, Vaughn leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "I'll come back for you." "I promise." Above, he could hear the soft movements of his men taking up defensive positions. He closed the trapdoor carefully and moved to the window, where he could see the approaching riders. They had dismounted at the edge of the property and were advancing on foot, using the outbuildings for cover. Vaughn checked his rifle, then positioned himself where he could watch both the front and back entrances. He had no intention of starting a gunfight if it could be avoided, not with Nora and the baby below. The attackers split up, 2 heading for the front door while the others circled toward the back. Vaughn recognized James Caldwell among them, his city clothes incongruous in the pre-dawn light. The attack, when it came, was surprisingly inept. The men at the front door tried to force it open, only to find themselves facing 3 of Vaughn's hands with leveled shotguns. At the back, Caldwell and his hired gun were intercepted before they could even reach the door. "That's far enough," Vaughn called, stepping onto the back porch with his rifle trained on Caldwell. "Drop your weapons." Caldwell froze, his expression shifting from surprise to calculated charm. "Xavier, there's been a misunderstanding. We were just attempting to kidnap a woman and her newborn child," Vaughn finished coldly. "Drop the gun, Caldwell. You're outmanned and outgunned." For a moment it seemed Caldwell might resist. Then, with a gesture to his companion, he carefully placed his pistol on the ground. "This changes nothing. The law is on my side." "We'll see about that," Vaughn replied. "Miguel, take these gentlemen to the bunkhouse and keep them there until the sheriff arrives." "You can't hold us against our will," Caldwell protested as Miguel and 2 other hands approached. "I can when you trespass on my property with weapons drawn," Vaughn countered. "Consider yourself lucky I'm not shooting you where you stand for threatening my household." As the men were led away, Vaughn returned to the root cellar, opening the trapdoor to find Nora waiting anxiously, William still asleep in her arms. "It's over," he told her, helping her up the ladder. "We've got them secured in the bunkhouse. Miguel's gone for the sheriff." Nora's relief was palpable. No one was hurt, not a shot fired, Vaughn confirmed, though Caldwell looked ready to try his luck. By mid-morning, Sheriff Blackburn had arrived with 2 deputies. After hearing Vaughn's account and interviewing the captured men, he placed Caldwell and his accomplices under arrest. Breaking and entering, attempted kidnapping, the sheriff listed grimly, plus conspiracy, based on what Martha Simmons reported about his plans for the child. Judge Hollister will want to hear all this when he arrives tomorrow. I intend to press charges to the fullest extent, Vaughn stated firmly. The sheriff nodded, his expression troubled. It's a serious matter, threatening a woman and child this way. But Caldwell's right about one thing, Vaughn legally, Mrs. Caldwell is still his brother's wife. Miss Hartwell, Vaughn corrected for what felt like the 100th time. And we'll address that tomorrow with the judge. After the sheriff departed with his prisoners, Vaughn found Nora in the nursery, changing William's swaddling clothes with practiced hands. The sheriff took them to Fort Bowie, he reported. Caldwell was still insisting he had every right to reclaim you for his brother. Nora's hands stilled momentarily. And legally, he might be right. A wife is considered her husband's property in many respects. Not when the husband sells her, Vaughn argued. Besides, I told you I had a plan. You've mentioned this mysterious plan several times, Nora said, lifting William to her shoulder. Don't you think it's time you shared it with me? Vaughn hesitated, suddenly uncertain. It depends on you, he finally admitted. On what you want. What I want is freedom, Nora replied simply. For myself and William, freedom from fear from Peter's claim on us. And that's what I want for you, Vaughn said softly. But there's more than one path to that freedom. Before he could elaborate, Alina appeared in the doorway. Ryder's coming, she reported. Looks like Judge Hollister, and he's got someone with him. Vaughn's expression brightened. They're early, good. He turned to Nora. Trust me a little longer, confused but willing, Nora nodded. I've trusted you this far. The judge had indeed arrived a day ahead of schedule, accompanied by a distinguished-looking gentleman Vaughn seemed to recognize. Judge Hollister, Vaughn greeted them on the porch. Senator Davis, thank you for coming so quickly. After receiving your message and hearing about last night's events, we thought it best not to delay, the judge replied. Sheriff Blackburn filled us in on Caldwell's attempted raid. The senator, a tall man with silver hair and shrewd eyes, nodded gravely. Deplorable business, Mrs. Caldwell and the child are unharmed, I trust, Miss Hartwell, Vaughn corrected automatically. And yes, they're both well. Perhaps we could speak with the young lady, Judge Hollister suggested, and see this child that has caused such commotion. Inside, Nora had composed herself to receive the visitors. Dressed in her best gown, with William freshly bathed and swaddled in his arms, she presented a picture of serene motherhood that clearly impressed both men. After introductions were made and refreshments served by Alina, the judge cleared his throat. Miss Hartwell or Mrs. Caldwell, as your legal status remains in question, I understand from Mr. Xavier that you wish to contest your husband's claim on you and the child. I do, Nora replied firmly. Peter Caldwell forfeited any right to us when he sold me to cover gambling debts. A serious allegation, the senator commented. Can you prove it? I witnessed the sale myself, Your Honor, Vaughn interjected. In Fort Bowie 1 month ago. Miss Hartwell was being auctioned as a laborer, despite her advanced pregnancy. The judge frowned. Selling one's wife is morally reprehensible but not always illegal, particularly if she's indentured to cover debts. There's more, Vaughn continued. James Caldwell has been openly discussing plans to separate Miss Hartwell from her child and sell the boy to a childless couple in Philadelphia. That would be illegal, the senator confirmed, his expression grave. Indeed, the judge agreed. But we're still faced with the fact that, under the law, Mrs. Caldwell remains married to Peter Caldwell of Philadelphia. Without evidence of extreme cruelty, abandonment, or other grounds recognized by the courts, a divorce would be difficult to obtain, even more so given the distance and jurisdictional issues. Nora's face fell, but Vaughn stepped forward. What if there were another solution? One that would protect both Nora and William from the Caldwells permanently? The judge raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening, Mr. Xavier." Vaughn turned to Nora, taking her hand in his. "This isn't how I wanted to do this," he said softly, "but circumstances don't allow for romance." He took a deep breath. "Nora Hartwell, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Nora stared at him, speechless with shock. "Your wife?" A new marriage would supersede the previous one if the first husband has abandoned or sold his wife, Senator Davis explained, understanding Vaughn's strategy. Particularly in the territories where the laws are more adaptable to frontier circumstances. It would require some legal maneuvering, the judge admitted, but with Senator Davis's influence and Mr. Xavier's standing in the territory, it could be arranged. Nora looked from the judge to the senator, then back to Vaughn. "You would marry me, take on another man's child. Why?" Vaughn's expression softened. "Because in 1 month you've brought more life to this house than it's seen in years. Because William has my heart already. And because—" He hesitated, then continued quietly, "because I think I've been falling in love with you since the moment you stood tall on that auction block." Tears welled in Nora's eyes. "Vaughn, you don't have to love me," he hastened to add. "Not yet. But I would be honored if you'd allow me to care for you and William, to protect you both, and perhaps, in time—" "Yes," Nora whispered, a single tear slipping down her cheek. "Yes, I will marry you." The judge cleared his throat, visibly moved by the exchange. "Well then, Senator, perhaps you could assist me in preparing the necessary documents. I believe we can perform the ceremony tomorrow, before returning to Fort Bowie to deal with James Caldwell." As the men withdrew to Vaughn's study to handle the legal matters, Nora found herself alone with Vaughn, William sleeping peacefully in her arms. "Did you mean it?" she asked softly. "About falling in love with me?" Vaughn took her free hand, his thumb gently caressing her palm. "Every word." "But Nora, if you're agreeing only to escape the Caldwells, I'm not," she interrupted, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "These past weeks, watching you with William, seeing your kindness and integrity, how could I not begin to care for you?" Vaughn's smile was radiant. "I'll spend every day earning your trust and love, Nora. I promise you that." The next morning dawned clear and bright, as if nature itself approved of the day's events. Eleanor had worked through the night to alter one of Nora's dresses into a suitable wedding gown, and the ranch hands had gathered wildflowers to decorate the house. The ceremony was simple but meaningful, conducted by Judge Hollister in the ranch house parlor with Senator Davis, Eleanor, and Miguel as witnesses. William, as if understanding the importance of the occasion, remained peacefully asleep in Eleanor's arms throughout. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Vaughn hesitated only briefly before leaning down to place a gentle, questioning kiss on Nora's lips. To his delight, she responded warmly, her free hand coming up to touch his cheek. "Mrs. Xavier," he murmured when they parted, his eyes alight with joy. "Mrs. Xavier," she repeated, testing the name and finding it felt right. "I like the sound of that." After the ceremony, the judge and senator departed for Fort Bowie, where James Caldwell awaited their judgment. Before leaving, the senator assured them that all legal paperwork would be filed immediately, establishing their marriage as valid and superseding any previous claims. "Caldwell will likely face charges for the attempted kidnapping," the judge added. "And when word reaches Philadelphia about his brother selling his pregnant wife, I doubt Peter Caldwell will risk showing his face in the territories." Once they were alone, Eleanor having tactfully withdrawn to give the newlyweds privacy, Vaughn took Nora's hands in his. "I know this has all happened very quickly," he said, his expression earnest. "And I want you to know that I'll never rush you or pressure you in any way. This marriage can be whatever you need it to be for as long as you need." Nora studied his face, this good, honorable man who had risked everything to save her and her son. "What if what I need," she said softly, "is a real husband, a true partner and father for William?" Vaughn's breath caught. "Nora, I'm not saying I'm fully in love yet," she clarified, her cheeks flushing. "But I care for you deeply, Vaughn, and I believe love is growing between us. Real love, based on respect and kindness and shared purpose." "That's all I could ever ask for," he replied, his voice husky with emotion. "The chance to build that love together day by day." Gently, he drew her into his arms, mindful of her still recovering body. This kiss was different from their first, deeper, more certain, a promise of the future they would create together. In the nursery, William stirred and began to fuss, breaking the moment. "Duty calls," Nora said with a smile, reluctantly pulling away. "Our first challenge as parents," Vaughn replied, his hand lingering on hers. "I'll help." As they tended to William together, Nora reflected on the extraordinary turn her life had taken. 1 month ago, she had stood on an auction block, 8 months pregnant and terrified. Now she was a mother, a wife, and mistress of one of the finest ranches in the territory. Most importantly, she was safe, truly safe for perhaps the first time in her life. "What are you thinking about?" Vaughn asked, noticing her thoughtful expression as she nursed William. "About journeys," she replied, "and how sometimes the worst moments can lead to the best outcomes." He nodded, understanding. "From an auction block to here, quite a journey indeed." "I'm glad it led me to you," she said simply. "To this home and this life we're building." Vaughn's smile was tender as he reached out to touch William's tiny hand. "As am I, Nora Xavier. As am I." 3 years later, the Double X Ranch had prospered beyond even Vaughn's ambitious dreams. The main house had been expanded to accommodate not only William, now a sturdy, curious toddler with his mother's dark eyes and quiet determination, but also his baby brother James, born exactly 9 months after Vaughn and Nora's wedding. On the 3rd anniversary of the day Vaughn had first seen Nora on the auction block, they sat together on the porch swing, watching as William helped Miguel groom one of the gentler horses while baby James slept in his cradle nearby. "He's going to be a rancher like his father," Nora observed, pride evident in her voice as William solemnly handed Miguel a brush. "With his mother's courage and compassion," Vaughn added, his arm around her shoulders. "A formidable combination." Nora leaned into her husband's embrace, marveling at how completely her fear had been replaced by contentment. The nightmares that had once plagued her sleep had faded, banished by Vaughn's steady presence and unwavering love. "Any word from Philadelphia?" she asked, referring to the occasional updates they received through Senator Davis's connections. "Nothing new," Vaughn replied. "Last we heard, Peter Caldwell had fled to Europe to escape his creditors. James served his sentence for the kidnapping attempt and apparently headed west to California." Nora nodded, unsurprised. "They'll never find us here, and even if they did, they would face not just me but every hand on this ranch and half the territory besides," Vaughn finished with a smile. "You're well loved in these parts, Mrs. Xavier." It was true. In the years since their marriage, Nora had become an integral part of the community around Fort Bowie. She taught reading to the children of ranch hands and neighboring homesteaders, helped organize the town's first lending library, and served as a midwife alongside Eleanor for several difficult births in outlying areas. "As are you, Mr. Xavier," she countered affectionately. The men would ride through fire for you. For us, he corrected, pressing a kiss to her temple. For our family. Family. The word still filled Nora with wonder and gratitude. From the darkest moment of her life had come this extraordinary blessing: a loving husband, 2 beautiful sons, and a community that valued and protected her. I have something for you, Vaughn said, reaching into his pocket. To mark the occasion, he placed a small velvet box in her hand. Inside, Nora found a delicate gold locket. When she opened it, she discovered a tiny daguerreotype of William and James on one side, and on the other an inscription, "From auction block to cherished wife, the journey of my heart." Tears filled her eyes as she read the words. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Not half as beautiful as you," Vaughn replied, helping her fasten the locket around her neck. "Or the life you've given me." Nora touched the locket, then reached up to caress her husband's cheek. "We gave it to each other. And we'll keep building it, day by day, memory by memory." "Always," he promised, drawing her close for a kiss that, even after 3 years, still held the same tenderness and promise as their first. As the sun began to set behind the mountains, casting the ranch in golden light, William ran to join his parents on the porch, climbing into Vaughn's lap with the easy confidence of a child who knows he is deeply loved. Baby James stirred and cooed in his cradle, reaching tiny hands toward his mother. Nora gathered her younger son into her arms, settling him against her shoulder as she leaned into her husband's side. The 4 of them together, watching the day end and a new night begin. This was the freedom she had longed for, the security she had never dared to dream might be hers. "Happy?" Vaughn asked softly, his arm tightening around her. Nora looked at her sons, at the home they had built, at the man who had risked everything to save her and had given her a life filled with love and purpose. "More than I ever imagined possible," she replied, and knew it for the simple truth. From auction block to beloved wife and mother, it was a journey she would travel again and again, if it meant ending here, in this moment, surrounded by the family that was her heart's true home.